Hey guys, so many of you wanted to see a male Botox patient. So this gorgeous patient, as you can see, is raising his eyebrows, he's furrowing, and he's smiling. So what do we notice about male patients? Well, their procerus and their corrugators are huge, and they do this thing called caveman. When they frown, did you notice? You have to scroll back to the beginning. Do you notice when he frowns, that procerus really folds over top of himself? It really folds down. So when that happens, it's very, very important that you stick enough in that procerus on top and on bottom to make sure that no longer happens, or they'll get the caveman syndrome. Notice how high our points are on the forehead. All the way, see the peak, the crown of his forehead, very, very, very high. If you forget to do that point, they'll have little weird wrinkles in that corner area. So you can see she staggered her points. This is the procerus, one above that big line and one below it. Now the corrugators, one on the head, one on the tail, and then one in the middle. 3 points in the corrugator. Why 3 points? Because the male corrugator is bigger. She's palpating for the tail. Look how big that head is. If you don't do 2 points, you're not going to hit everything. So you have to hit the tail. The head is, look how high the tail is. So a lot of people, when we train them, they're like, I don't feel comfortable going that high. Remember, you're going halfway in. This is not a deep injection. The tail is a very, 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 very medial. So meaning not superficial, not deep, but in between. And please see how his corrugator comes down with the procerus. They come in unison to make that fold there. Usually I have to touch that up after 2 weeks. Most of my male patients I bring back in 2 weeks. For crow's, same thing. When you could see when he was smiling, he didn't have a lot of crow's feet. Why are we doing his crow's? Why? To make sure that his eyebrow does not fall down. So here we're just explaining why that we draw out the corrugator. You can see Hania drawing out that corner of the corrugator and see how high that tail is. You have to realize everyone's tail is different. Sometimes it's low, sometimes it's high, but it's very important to hit it, because if you don't hit that tail, then it will kind of pull on that side. So if your patient comes back and you see them frowning, but it's more lateral, that means you didn't hit the tail properly. So still injecting the crows. So dose wise, I'll list below exactly the dose that we use, but it's quite a bit higher. We basically did 7 units in the head, another 7 units in the head, and another 3 units. So it's 7 plus 7 plus 3 just on one corrugator. Look in the frontalis though, look how low she's dosing. She's doing about, I would say, 1 unit each little position on the forehead. Why? Because he doesn't have lines there. He has very, very, very smooth forehead. For someone that has a little bit stronger, for that male that has those deep set ones, the deep set lines, you might want to increase it to 2. Regardless, that male still needs lift on his frontalis. So if you overdo it, that's when they're going to get that caveman look. So it's better to do, in my opinion, it's better to do how we're doing it now, where we're doing small doses, 1 or 2 units, and then you can see how it's spread out. If your patient is like this patient where his hairline's a little bit receding and his frontalis is very wide, you have to cover the entire frontalis. I think old school books say that you stay mid-pupillary in. No, you go, if that's pulling wide with the frontalis, then you pull wide as well. And then watch as we go all the way outside. So you can see it's still an intramuscular injection going straight in, and look how high in the hairline. Oops, our Uber Eats is here. 1 second, please. Okay, sorry, it's an emergency. So on the forehead, we did a total of 12 units, very small amount. Now you can see we're going at the tail end of his eyebrow. This is not creating an eyebrow lift. Do not worry. Men get very, very concerned over this. We're not doing an eyebrow. We're simply just making sure that our bicular oculi muscle that's very strong in a man does not pull down. So we're placing little 3-unit blebs in each of the spots. So you start the temporal fusion line a little bit more lateral for a man. See how his temporal fusion line is more medial. We start a little bit more lateral. Why are we doing the nasalis? We're doing the nasalis because when he frowns, he recruits his nasalis. So this is to prevent recruitment and more wrinkles on his actual nasalis. This is the only reason why, because he frowns so hard with his glabellar complex, his Proceris, his corrugators, and his nasellus. That's why we did it. Again, same thing here. We're not creating an eyebrow lift. We're simply just adding more around orbicularis oculi to make sure that he doesn't pull down on the eyebrow. This guy is actually great. A lot of men that you'll see are very hooded and their eyebrows are below the orbital rim. He does not have a ton. Some men, the same thing. You'll have to do 2 little rows around orbicularis oculi. Remember that muscle is very thin, but it's very wide. So you always have the patient smile. You see how when he smiles, he gets that little jelly roll right under the eye. So we're taking 2 units and going right under the eye to prevent that jelly roll from getting worse. If he had thought hypertrophy there or bags under his eyes, we would not be doing this injection point, but this is just a jelly roll injection, and that's to prevent that jelly roll from getting worse. If we didn't inject there and we injected the whole lateral aspect of his orbicularis oculi, that would get worse. Now, this is the most important one, the Proceris. See, we're going deep. See, we did 5 units. Now we're doing another 5 units. That's 10 units right in his Proceris. That is a big amount. Now on the corrugators, see, we're holding on the inside of the orbital rim, going deep, hubbing that needle, and doing 7 units on that medial head. That's a lot. We're not rubbing it in. Now we're going into the head again, straight down, and doing another 5 units. So far on the head of the corrugator, we've done 10 units. Now we're coming on the side and we're doing another about 3 to 4 units. And actually we decided to do a second one. So it's okay if that head of that corrugator is so wide on that tail and on the head. If it's so wide, you have to make sure you do enough. We are 1 to 1, well 1 to 1.5 technically, but that spread is very small. So if that's a thick corrugator, and you can see she's coming from the side, that's because that tail sometimes kind of pops through. You see it, the indentation, it looks like a little arrow. That's very, very normal. And see, you just pop, it pops out. So we're popping from the side. There's nothing wrong with doing a diagonal mark as well. That's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So we have a little bit left over. So that's why we're doing just a lateral little, we can't let the Botox go to waste. So I'll list everything below, all the dosages, my